This is the Prophecy Project. Understanding the times, the nations in military conflicts, with Bible teacher and author Alan Bonk.
Welcome to session number 16 of the Prophecy Project. Last session, I went through Isaiah 31 and part of Daniel 11. We found that Asher, the Assyrian, is killed by a man that is with him in his stronghold somewhere near Jerusalem. This assassin is not a soldier or a mean man, but was probably an advisor of some type that was in the bunker with him. But Asher did not see it coming. We also covered the first portion of Daniel, chapter 11, where we learned that there will be 4 kings in Persia. The 4th king, the last one, attacks into and fights with Egypt and defeats them. He also moves into the Holy Land and is affected or afflicted by the ships of Kittim. These events, timing and sequence, are the same as Asher's, as we found in Numbers 24. Now, this was in an earlier session. I explained how Asher and the 4th Persian king are the same man, and that the ethnic background is Assyrian, but his nationality will be Persian. He comes from a small people, an ethnic group, the Assyrians, living in northern Iran. Now they're in the Lake Urmia area. The 4th Persian king, Asher, will also set up the Abomination of Desolations in the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Now, for those of you who don't understand the significance of the Abomination of Desolations, I will cover some references and try and explain a little bit about it here. Jesus' disciples ask him in the New Testament in Mark 13:4 to tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the sign of all these things being fulfilled, or when they shall be fulfilled. Verse 14, he says, "But when ye shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let him that readeth understand. Then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains." Jesus is using Daniel 11:31, our text, as a major sign of the end times. The placement of the abomination is in the sanctuary, where it ought not be. The sanctuary is on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and the people are to flee to the mountains when they see that taking place. Now, in Luke 21:20, Jesus also tells his disciples, "And when you see Jerusalem encompassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh." Verse 21, "Then at that time let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains." Now, those are 2 New Testament references tying Daniel right in to the days we live today. Now, Daniel also refers to the Abomination of Desolations in chapter 9, verse 27. This account in chapter 9 is about 70 weeks of years prescribed against or about the Jewish people. It is not, of course, my intent here to dissect the first 69 in this session. Perhaps we can do that later on in the project, but only today, the 70th week. There will be a prince of this world, not of God, and this prince will make or confirm a covenant with Israel for 1 week of 7 years. And at the halfway point, he will break that covenant. Let me read the scripture, 9:27. "And he, the prince, shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst, or halfway through, of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. For the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, he being the prince." even until the consummation, the time of the end, and that determined shall be poured out upon the desolate. Now, this half week in the midst of the 7, 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days, or as it's often said, times and a half a time, is seen in Scripture many times as it relates to the end times and to these events. In Revelation chapter 12:6, a remnant of the Jewish people are seen as a woman, and more specifically as the woman who brought forth the Messiah that will reign over the earth with a rod of iron. In verse 6, it says, "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that she should feed there 1,260 days, or 1,260 days, 3.5 years. Then later in the same chapter, verse 14, talking about the same woman and the same event, it says, "And the woman were given, and to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is to be nourished for a time, times, and a half a time, from the face of the serpent." Now, time, the reference there, is equal to 1 year. Times being 2 years. And half a time is equal to a half a year, or 6 months. Total, that would be time times and a half a time, 3.5 years. Now, the connection of the abomination of desolation and the ceasing of the sacrifice is important to us as students because they happen as one event. They're associated. The sacrifice in the temple is stopped, making it possible for the Assyrian to set up the abomination in the temple. Now, let's go and finish Daniel chapter 11. I'll pick it up in verse 36. "And the king, the 4th king, the Assyrian, shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods," the real God, "and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, the wrath. For that which is determined shall be done." Now here we see that Asher's arrogance really becomes manifest. He is acting only according to his will. The charge or the call that we read about in earlier sessions from God for him to do certain things is totally discarded. It's gone. And he sets himself up to be worshiped in the temple of God in Jerusalem. He exalts himself above every god and will be allowed to do this until God accomplishes his work with his people, the Jewish people in Israel. He says, "When I have done my perfect work in Zion, I will punish the stout heart of the king of Assyria." He also blasphemes God. He has become arrogant. And with his mouth he speaks great things against God. This scripture is closely echoed in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. It says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, that day shall not come except there be a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, the man that will go to hell, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." Verse 37, "Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all." Now we're back in Daniel. "He has now forsaken his natural heritage completely as an Assyrian, thrown off everything, and because he now rules the world." Now you have to understand, no other man has ever done what he has done. No other ruler has ever been able to make this claim. He sees himself above all other men, all other rulers, all gods. Verse 38, but in his estate, in that which he has and he has grasped, he will honor the God of forces. And a God that his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold, silver, and precious stones, and pleasant things. Now, he acknowledges the help that he receives from the God of forces. This also means fortresses or civilization, the God of the world, Lucifer, and commonly known as Satan. He does not bow down to worship, but he does bring an offering to him and acknowledge what he's done for him and that he is a helper. Satan is the God that his fathers refused to serve when they left Lucifer, when they accepted Christianity back in the 1st century AD. They turned from the old Assyrian god called Asher. And Asher's symbol, when you look at his symbol, shows clearly that he is Lucifer, or the angel of the sun, the ringleader of the fallen angels. Verse 39, thus shall he, Asher, the Assyrian, do in the most strongholds with the strange god, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. So he is now, when he goes into that stronghold we talked about, he's going in there to bolster his spiritual power and to try and muster himself to the point where he can stand up to God. And he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. This is what they're up to. Remember, Asher had gone to the stronghold because of fear. He had gone to seek and to receive help from the god of this world, Lucifer. But Lucifer does not know the hearts of men. And that advisor, that man that isn't a mean man, comes in with a knife or with a sword and kills him. Only God knows the hearts of men. Only God could have known that he was going to do that. Lucifer is a second-rate god. Now, the next 5 verses in Daniel are a synopsis of a set of military battles commonly understood as the battles of Armageddon, which the Assyrian will be involved with during the last 7 years of the age, the last 3.5 years, and Daniel's 70th week. Now, I heard this sequence explained by Dr. Robert Hooley back in the 1970s, and except for some minor differences, I still see it the same today. I believe that this sequence starts at a time when the Assyrian has acknowledged or confirmed a defense covenant with Israel at the time of the end. It says he'll confirm the covenant. Verse 40, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, push at Asher. We've already seen in last week's session what happens between Egypt and this vile king, Asher. Egypt is destroyed and pillaged by Asher. I believe this is campaign number 1 of Armageddon. Verse 40 continues, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships. This, I believe, is campaign number 2. This is an attack that flies in the face of what the Antichrist, or the Asher, the Assyrian, is able to put out and protect Israel. It flies in the face of that, and the defender, Asher, isn't able to stop it. Russia is defeated by the Lord on the mountains of northern Israel. You can go to Ezekiel 38 and you can read the details. Verse 40 continues, and he, Asher, shall enter into the countries, shall overflow and pass over. This is another military campaign. I believe this is in response to Russia's defeat, that Asher is able to move or overflow and pass over into areas and countries that Russia, the bear, no longer has dominion over. Verse 41, and he, Asher, shall enter into the glorious land, into the Middle East. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. This is the campaign number 4. This takes place in the middle of the 7. This is at the 3.5 year point when he moves in and takes over. Now, all of the Middle East is taken except portions of Jordan, which are captured by Asher. The areas not included are areas that the Israelis from Judea are told to flee to. Isn't that interesting? That those are just set aside by God. Remember, a place prepared for them for 3.5 years. Verse 44, but tidings or news out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. He's going to get an idea of something else going on. Therefore he, the Assyrian, shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly make away many. This is campaign 5 and 6. Tidings from the east relates to the kings of the east, which we read about coming across the Euphrates River, and as seen in Revelations 9, 13, and 14, and Revelation 16, 14, and 16. Tidings out of the north is campaign number 6. Russia was destroyed in campaign number 2. The news coming from the north is that northern power base. Remember the nations that had forsaken the Holy Covenant? He goes and he gets power and armies from them to do what he wants. Well, he's hearing back from them. In Daniel 7:20, it tells us that 3 of those 10 horns shall be plucked up by the roots by the Assyrian. We will study Daniel 7 in later sessions to fill in our understanding of that, but not now. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. This is in Jerusalem, Zion. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. That's campaign number 7. That is the end. That's when Messiah, that man from Bethlehem, will come into Jerusalem and stop this. Remember, he is the peace of Israel. The Assyrian dies. He comes to his end in Jerusalem. And having subdued the whole world, except for the place of the refuge in Edom, these descriptions are brief. Much of the scripture around them is yet to be covered. But it at least gives us a session, a sequence of how they're going to go down, because we often see Egypt in another scripture, and we see Israel, and we see Russia, and these other areas, in Damascus, and we say, how do they fit together in what sequence? This, I believe, is a sequence. Now, I need to stop here and close this session at this point, but next session, I want to cover Daniel chapter 7 and perhaps 8. The little horn that they describe will be covered. Thank you.
This was only one session of many. Be sure to continue watching the Prophecy Project series. If you would like to read more information on this subject, you can find Alan's books on Amazon.com.